Prairie Yard and Garden is a production of the University of Minnesota Morris in cooperation with Pioneer Public Television. Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.
When we are doing a building or remodeling project, it needs painting, flooring, and curtains or window treatments to finish it off and really make the project beautiful. Likewise, the landscaping we do really finishes and makes our home or business beautiful too. I'm Mary Holm, and come along with Prairie Yard and Garden as we visit the landscape project for the new Pioneer Public TV building in Granite Falls, Minnesota. When my husband Tom and I are trying to do landscaping in our own yard, we have such different tastes completely that we have a hard time agreeing on what to plant. So imagine if you have a whole new building or an office building or a home to landscape, what a job that must be. So today we're going to visit with Chris Howard, who is the project manager for the new Pioneer building here at Granite Falls, Minnesota. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me, Mary.
Like I said, my husband Tom and I can't even agree on planting a certain shrub in our yard. How in the world did you develop the beautiful landscape for Pioneer's new building?
Well, first of all, I didn't develop any of it. I just executed what smarter people than me drew up. When the project came out, Ron and Diane Fagan announced the donation, and then we got together with Pioneer Public TV, and we put together a request for proposal from architects. And we went out to multiple architects, and we got back the proposal from MSR, who had the winning contract here. They rounded up some really good architects, first themselves on the building design and layout, the acousticians to the landscape designers, and then they put together the concepts and present them to Pioneer Public Television and Ron and Diane Fagan, and then collaborating between all the parties, somebody would make a decision, and that's kind of what we'd run with.
What is the difference between a landscape architect and a landscape installer?
The architect, they draw up the layout of the architecture and then all the specifications for the plants, things like that.
Okay.
So they'll specify what plants are going to go where, what rock goes where, and everything.
Were there certain considerations that you had to take into account or that they did as far as when designing even like the drainage and the slope and all of that?
Absolutely. So as the construction goes on, you see a lot of little changes pop up. You know, you might run into something. Here we had to have a septic mound over there. We had to have storm drainage. And then on top of it, we had all the rocks that we had to excavate. So we tried to keep our excavation down to a minimal because of all the boulders that we were finding in the soil. So that dictated how some of the grade of the project went. And then also there's pricing, you know, everything costs money. So sometimes as you're doing things, you might find a cheaper option, and that's the route you go. And
what were some of the features that you wanted with this project? It seems like maybe sustainability and low maintenance maybe were some of the things that you were looking for?
It did. The architects, again, they did a great job. They were focused on that. Obviously, Pioneer, they're in charge of running a television station, not maintaining a building. So they went with a native prairie outlook, as you can see here, which will be low maintenance. They have very few areas they actually have to mow and maintain. Weeding might be their toughest thing, but once the natural prairie grass comes up, you will hardly be able to tell the difference between weeds and the prairie grass. So MSR, that was their main objective. Is their initial concept had this building kind of popping out of the prairie, and that was the look they initially wanted.
And I'm sure that a lot of this is going to be really nice as far as in drawing in butterflies, hummingbirds, and just fitting in well with the local area too.
You have a DNR Natural Wildlife Center right there across the road. You have the pond over there. You have the Minnesota River Valley across that way. It really does blend in well. When they drew up the building, obviously there's the darker brick on the other side. That was meant to look like the granite outcropping from over there. And that's why you see some of the bricks and the stone popped out here on the building, give it more of a natural look.
What was your role in developing all this?
I was the project manager, so I was lucky enough to draw that card. Right at the beginning, I got to start putting together the RFP, request for proposal. Put together all that information, then just kind of coordinating between Ron and Diane and Pioneer Public Television and MSR and the other architects and our engineers.
And I know that you did an area with rain garden and everything for drainage and stuff. Is that functioning the way that you had anticipated, or is that turning out the way you wanted?
Yep, no, that worked great. We have a rubber roof with eaves, and so all the water from the building goes through drain pipes under the building into the storm pond here for natural drainage.
Awesome. So it's a good place to have that drainage go too.
Absolutely. The floor elevation of the building was the peak at this site, and the rest of the grade out here was vastly different from what it is now. As we were excavating, 25 feet below the surface was solid granite. It's like our well is 600 feet deep and 576 feet is through solid granite. In between that 25 foot and the surface is giant boulders. So every excavation we went, if we wanted a hole this size, ended up being this big. And so we wanted to keep excavations and grading down to a minimal. So we had the building raised up a little bit, and then our flow was supposed to go that way. We ended up changing it this way, just the natural flow of the site. Sometimes even just a foot below the surface, you might end up with a giant boulder that we had to take out and spend the time ripping that out.
If there are some people watching at home, like homeowners or business owners, and want to do a remodel project or a landscape project, what advice would you have for them?
Hire an architect. It makes it a lot easier and no arguments between the wife.
You don't run into situations like Tom and I. And I'm guessing that it really helps to have a good landscaper involved too, somebody that you trust and know that you can work with. And
it does, and that goes for all the aspects of the project. You know, you hire good contractors that have done a lot. Engineers and architects, they'll put their best design on paper, but sometimes that just doesn't work with what you get. And so a good landscaper like Steve Snordum, and then our own construction crews, Fagan Inc., you run into things and you ad-lib a little bit and you end up with a really nice product.
How did you end up picking Steve Snordum in order to do the landscaping for you?
He's a local guy and had a good reputation around Granite Falls and has done a lot of work for us in the past.
That in itself is a great recommendation, is to visit with somebody local, because they know the climate and they know the soils, and so that's
what works and what doesn't. Yep.
You bet. Well, thank you so much for coming and being a part of the show, and we really, really appreciate your input.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
We are here today with Steve Snordum of Snordum's Nursery. And Steve, you are the landscaper on this project, the landscape installer. Tell us a little about your background.
I've been actually landscaping for almost 50 years now. I started helping my grandfather and my dad when I was like 12, 13 in the greenhouse in Canby. And I'm third generation. And there is a fourth generation, my son in Bismarck, North Dakota. I was notified by Ron and Diane Fagan. I do most of their work and I really appreciate it, but they called me up one day and wanted me to quote this job, so they welcomed me to the site. So here I am.
Are there any special considerations with this whole project, like as far as soil type and special things that you need to take into account to do this project?
This project is really interesting because the project is more of a naturalized native planting. on the 2-acre grounds. And one of my biggest concerns with this site is, because it's a commercial site, the soils are just beat to death by the time we get to them. And we really have to recondition the site as far as the soil texture to get it back where it should be so plants will thrive. And so we've got to come in and at least disc 6 to 8 inches deep, maybe add some soil amendments like compost. A lot of locations here, it's just like a blacktop, because most of the time when they move earth on a commercial project, they move it when it's not dry. And they go back and forth with big equipment around the building. So it's very important to get the soil back to where it should be. Most of the plants on the 2 acres is native seeding. The plantings around the buildings, there's some mass plantings of ornamental grasses, some junipers, and then there's large shade trees like birch and oak, some hackberry. It's going to be an interesting site because there's not a lot of sites that do completely naturalized native plantings anymore. There's very little grass, turf grass to mow. There's only a small portion of grass down by the pond that's actually bluegrass that will be mowed, and then a small section off one of the patios. Otherwise, it's all naturalized. So you're going to see flowers flowering at different times of the year. I know that we have to plant a couple thousand daffodil bulbs, I believe. So they're going to have color early in the spring, midsummer, and fall. On the design, they had a retention pond which holds water for the drainage from this site. That'll be planted with rain garden seed blend.
You mentioned that you will be doing a patio too, so now you're going to be doing some hardscaping?
Right. We've completed one patio so far, and we're working on the second one now before it snows this fall. But it's really important to have a good solid base under the pavers. We usually have 6-7 inches of compacted granite fines. On top of that, 1 inch of sand that's screeded off and leveled, and then we install our pavers that are compacted. If you don't have a good solid base, you might get one end of the patio that sinks and one end won't, and then you'll have water standing. One other important thing about the pavers that over the last 8 or 10 years, they've come out with a product called a polymeric sand, which we sweep on top of the pavers after the installation. And then once that gets wet, there's a glue in this sand that hardens almost like a sealer, and that prevents any ants or weeds from coming up through the cracks of the pavers. So we don't put a fabric underneath the pavers or any type of pre-emergent chemical for weeds, but the polymeric sand does a great job. The water will run off. We've got a 2-inch slope on our patio here because it's 25 feet out from the building, and so we put about a 2-inch slope, so the water will run off the patio. Now, if it was permeable pavers, the water would go between the cracks and just soak in. And that's got different regulations as far as how many acres of land you're taking up on a structure. Sometimes if you have too much blacktop and structure on a piece of property, then they require you use permeable pavers, but we didn't have to here. Now, some people get a little confused about pavers and landscaping block. Pavers is like a sidewalk or a hard surface you walk on. Landscaping block, we use the landscaping block for planters or retaining walls. And I've had people ask me for a price on some landscape block, and I assume it's for a planter or a retaining wall, but then they're talking about a patio in their backyard. So.
Okay. Are you going to be seeding lawn seed also?
We will be laying sod. They've required to lay sod up by the patio. But there is a place that we're going to be seeding by the pond.
Is there going to be irrigation installed here on this whole project too?
Right around the building, there's a lot of drip irrigation where there's mass plantings of ornamental grasses or junipers. And there's a couple of areas, the bluegrass will be irrigated too. So we'll be irrigating the bluegrass, whether it's sodded or seeded. And there'll be a lot of drip irrigation around the building.
What do you mean by drip irrigation?
Well, drip irrigation is where they've got lines run approximately 18 inches apart, going back and forth through the planting bed, where when that zone is turned on, water is just emitted slowly in the planting bed, almost like an old-fashioned soaker hose. Okay, so you don't see anything above ground, but everything gets watered. So.
Okay, so it isn't going to have like a pop-up head that goes back and forth or anything like that?
No, there will be where the bluegrass is, but there'll be very limited amount of that.
Okay, I would guess that that would be more of a water savings and to use the drip irrigation, be more efficient watering there, huh?
It is a lot more. It's very efficient and very cost savings.
Steve, when somebody is doing a new construction, whether it's a commercial like this, a commercial building, or a home, when should they start thinking about their landscaping, or how do you go about doing that?
Well, actually there's two different stages. If you're building a residential home and you've got a wooded lot, sometimes they'll get a call and they'll ask us, what trees should we save? What trees should we cut down? And if they've got a big hill in the back of their lot, you know, they'll ask, am I going to need a retaining wall here, or can you develop a nice swale to drain the water out instead? And if we can, that's a big cost savings to them. Other than that, after the home is built and they've got their concrete poured, so we know the locations of their sidewalks and their driveway, that's really the best time for us to show up and take some measurements and talk to the client about what their needs and thoughts are as color, texture, what type of plant material they like. And then we'll go back and design a nice design for them and get back together with them and maybe tweak it a little bit. But even on a commercial lot like this, where they've got the landscape was already designed, during the process of construction, sometimes they see they need a retaining wall someplace or an arbor for shade, and that's usually added on.
Well, the important part is, I think, is that you have a plan, whether you can afford to do it all at one time or do it in pieces, but it's nice if you have a plan because then it all ties in together when you're done.
Exactly. If you have a comprehensive plan and do the front yard one year and the backyard the next, it makes a lot of sense. You're saving a lot of money and everything looks like it's been done as one project. So.
And it sounds like with this big project here there's a plan, a nice plan to follow, and so it should be tied in beautifully.
Yep, with this project here, about the beginning of the second year, midway through the season, the second year, that's where you're going to really see things flourish. Usually the first year, things are smaller and a little peonier. They don't flower as good, but usually the second and third year, stuff really looks great. So.
Why should someone grow grapes in Minnesota?
Growing grapes is a great opportunity to have a crop that you can kind of baby along all summer and have a fantastic crop in the fall. Grapes are a fun way to be able to produce jams, jellies, juice, or even wine, which is one of the key reasons that people in Minnesota have started growing grapes. The University of Minnesota has developed a number of varieties that perform very well here in Minnesota, including Frontenac and Marquette, La Crescent, which are great for winemaking. But there are also table grape varieties like Swenson Red and also Edelweiss, which are great for fresh eating. Other reasons to grow grapes are for their ornamental purposes. They look great over pergolas, trellises, or along fences, and there's a lot of great visual appeal for growing grapes.
Ask the Arboretum Experts has been brought to you by the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in Chanhassen, dedicated to enriching lives through the appreciation and knowledge of plants.
Well, Steve, the last time we visited, you were here and you were getting started and you were putting in some of the hardscape and everything. Bring us up to date. Where are we at now?
Well, for the last 8 to 12 weeks, we did a lot of prep work as far as getting the grounds ready for planting. And the most of the stuff we've done is around the building. We've installed a drip irrigation system that's zoned out, which is really good for the maintenance guy. There's a couple of areas, grassy areas, that have separate zones on them. One is a grassy area by the outdoor patio. That's got a separate zone, and that's just basically your lawn grass. There's another grass area down by the pond for maybe a gathering area if they ever have socials or parties here. The rest of it, at this end of the parking lot, we've got what's called 6 to 9 inch riprap granite stone. It's a 10-foot buffer from the end of the parking lot to the junipers, and that provides a great spot for snow removal.
Oh, okay.
And on the outside, the trees, we've got Kentucky coffee tree, we've got white oak, there's some maple, there's some aspen,
Okay.
and then there's a variety of birch called Dakota or pinnacle birch, which is kind of a pyramidal variety. And you can see those right there, but they grow in a nice cylindrical fashion and shape.
Would it be possible for you to show us some of the specific plants and planting areas that you did?
Sure. You know, Mary, back here is really the main entrance to the building. It's kind of tucked back here in the parking lot. If you look at the end of the parking lot, we've got about a 10-foot buffer of 6 to 9 inch riprap rock, and that's in front of the Medora juniper, and that's just a good buffer for snow removal, or if there's a lot of salt runoff, you know, it protects the junipers. As we come up, move down this way, there's mass plantings of ash leaf spirea, honeysuckle, native grasses, and it really kind of sets off the whole prairie theme that they've tried to accomplish here. Okay. Over here, they've got the brand new patio for entertainment. Off the patio is a separate grass area, just to give it a little lawn type feel. The Dakota pinnacle birch are planted here. They're cylindrical trees, and it gives it a very nice appearance, and it really complements, even though they're an upright tree, it complements the horizontal lines of the architecture of the building.
Did you pick out the plant materials that were used here?
No, actually the landscape architect, there was a landscape architect's design that we went by.
Oh, okay, okay.
So it was kind of nice to have that too. The hydromulching, as you can see, is blown on the outer areas of the lawn.
I was wondering what that was. Tell me what is hydromulching?
Hydromulching is usually a 100% wood product that's mixed with a tackifier or a glue.
Okay.
And a lot of times you mix the seed with it and blow it on. Now the glue helps to prevent erosion in heavy rains.
Oh,
But
okay.
in this case, where we planted native grasses, we had to plant the native grasses first, broadcast the forbs next, and then hydromulch on top of that, just to mulch the area.
Okay.
We're also going through right now planting 5,000 native plants that were in 6-pack 2-inch containers. That'll just give the whole area kind of a boost.
Okay. It's great that you had a landscape plan to work with.
It is, and we appreciate it. It was a well-designed project. However, when you get into a project, there's always some things through common sense that we just have to tweak a little bit. And one of them was the rock retaining wall underneath the canopy where water really gushes off. We had an erosion problem there, and so we dealt with it. You can see where the water would gush off that canopy. They had nothing as far as a retaining wall here, so we acquired some native rock that we had on property here.
Okay.
And we developed a little retaining wall there, and then we just gave it a little bit of an accented dry riverbed creek area look to it. And that took care of the erosion problems here.
Okay. And it looks nice too.
Yeah, I think it really added something to it. It'll be really nice. Then here we've got a mass planting of horizontalis juniper behind me. In a period of 4 to 5 years, it'll be just a solid green mat.
About what was the spacing that you used for those?
Oh, the spacing is around 4 foot apart.
Okay.
And with that spacing, you will get a solid mat where it really holds the weeds down and very, very little maintenance. And there is drip irrigation under this mulch as well.
Okay. Sounds good. And it looks like you've got some grass coming in here.
Right. There's a little buffer zone between the tar and this concrete wall. It's a blend called no-mow meadow mix.
Okay.
And what it is, it's just a blend of fescue grasses that you never mow, and it almost looks like silk when it grows. Maybe grows 4 to 5, 6 inches tall, and that again will just be a solid mat. Now this area here is irrigated with a separate zone on the irrigation system, but it's going to be pretty much a maintenance, real low maintenance facility here.
That's great, and I'm sure that they will really appreciate that too.
Oh yes, yep, indeed.
Okay, how about if we take a look at one of the other sides?
Sounds great. This is another entrance here, Mary, that they will occasionally use for entertainment. They added a nice brick paver patio here with a sidewalk to access to the parking lot. And of course, at this end of the patio is rather high out of the ground. So we again used some native boulders that were on site to retain this end of the patio. And as you can see behind me, there's another mass planting of native grass.
Okay.
Again, like the junipers, the native grass will all grow together, and it'll be a nice sea of green. We've got some goat's beard there. That's a mass planting of goat's beard, and down there we've got the no-mow meadow mix again.
Okay.
And of course, the nice columnar birch, Dakota birch, pinnacle birch.
To me, it looks like this whole landscape project was geared towards minimum maintenance, minimum care required, and being able to sustain itself without a whole lot of extra input.
Exactly, and they wanted to tie the native aspect into the native surroundings of the granite outcropping in the Granite Falls area. So
you have done a beautiful job of incorporating and doing the landscaping and just fitting it in to the surrounding area. I thank you so much for showing us all of the landscape. Now that it's done, it's been fun to come back and see it.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a very fun project.
Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.